Now, data from the January unaudited report in Nigeria's pension funds industry portfolio shows the value of pension fund in dollar terms fell by about 29% to $14.3 billion in January this year compared to the $20.4 billion recorded in December last year. Oguche Agudah, Chief Executive Officer of Pension Fund Operators Association of Nigeria, joins me now for more on this discussion. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today, Mr. Agudah. Let's start off really now with this dip we're seeing here. Calculating in dollar terms, the drop to 9%, and what's driving this? Your reading of the numbers.
I think the first thing is that, we live in Nigeria, we spend in Naira, so I typically don't like to to change the Naira.
The math is a math in there.
But I think it's obvious because of the depreciation that happened in December, January. Everyone knows what happened with the Naira. So that's, of course, if you want to change it. But in terms of Naira terms, the growth has been very strong, keeps on growing. So I don't like to do the change because we spend here, we invest here. So I like to keep it on Naira terms.
That's the best calculation in Naira terms. Now let's talk about Naira terms. Now, we've seen the CBN also take certain moves to help prop up the local currency as well now. But how would you say the currency has fared? Yes, this week we've seen a gradual rebound. Questions have been around the fair value of the Naira and how quickly will we inch closer to that 1,200 Naira rate. For you, an assessment of what's going on.
Yeah, I think the honest truth is that countries like Nigeria, especially countries that are import dependent, ever so often will have to face this devaluation issues and because we don't export as much as we import. So for us as pension funds, we definitely would like to invest offshore, at least a portion. Yeah. And we've been pushing for that for a number of years, and we continue to do that. There's a lot of work that is going on under the scenes. And Nigeria is probably one of the only countries in the world that the pension funds don't invest offshore because it does make sense. You are diversifying, you are hedging against currency devaluation. And then the markets, the depth of the local market might not be enough to be able to take all those investments. So it's something we need to do. If you look at countries like Botswana, 70% of the pension fund assets can be invested offshore. South Africa, 45%. If you look at LATAM, like Brazil, 40%, Chile, 90%. So for us, there has to be a case for us to be able to invest a portion offshore because it does help when things like this happen.
Yes, especially hedging against volatility as we see panning out here. But let's talk about some of the developments that have panned out here. Out of the 19.5 trillion that we've seen in terms of total assets under the contributory pension scheme now, we've seen the bulk of that now being invested in government securities. With the move from the CBN saying we're going to see bigger OMO auctions, we've also seen the T-bills and bond auctions so far this year. These are bigger sizes. In terms of investment, how do you see the trajectory going on here?
Yeah, I think traditionally, the bulk of the assets, local pension funds have always been invested in government bonds or bills. And I don't think it's peculiar to Nigeria, it's global. But I think maybe the percentage is typically about 65%, which is like the maximum they can invest in. And I think that percentage will continue. The quantum will definitely increase as the contributions increase, but the percentage will typically be at the limit of about 65%. I think what we now need to say is what makes of the other 35% and how is that spread? And
it's also important at this point in time now when we're looking at strategies to also crowd in much more private sector investment. We're also seeing data here showing that the investment in infrastructure funds by PFAs have also risen about 32% in January this year. Now, when we're looking at the bigger picture for the full year, how large will it be?
I think with infrastructure investments, it's less than 5% of the total number. And it's inching up in terms of Naira values, but in terms of percentages, it's
still a small margin.
But then we are seeing a lot of engagement with the market in terms of whether infrastructure bonds, infrastructure funds. There are many players coming in to see how we can work with a local, international, and the pension funds themselves are investing a lot more in some of those real assets through the funds and through the bonds because we can invest directly. So I guess it's just to find the right structures, the right framework that enable us to do more of that.
Yes, talking about how attractive these are to also fund managers as well. If you could have a whisper to the CBN governor at this point in time, the meeting will hold next week now, what would that be?
Well, I think the local community is happy with the increase in rates, so more of that because yes, the yields are higher for our fixed income security. So I think for that, but also just the stability of the Naira on the one hand, but also I think thirdly is for the window for local pension funds to be able to invest offshore because that helps everyone, the RSA holders, the economy, diversification. I think that's a whisper to his ears.
Lastly, before I let you go now, also looking at mortgage plans as well now, the the word isn't acceptance, but the utilization of this window still remains largely muted.
Yes, it's been largely muted, and I think there's a pass-through with the mortgage banks, with the property developers, and the pension funds. So
and housing costs are rising.
It's rising. I think, but for us, we're happy that the window is there and people are accessing it. It will take time to grow as the ecosystem develops, but we're happy the window is there and encouraging people to, jump in and access that part of your RSA for mortgages.
Hopefully we'll have people to explore that option as they look to become homeowners at this point in time. We'll leave the conversation here for now. Thank you so much for talking to us today, Mr. Agudah. That was Oguche Agudah, the Chief Executive Officer of Pension Fund Operators Association of Nigeria.